Ready?
Ready.
3, 2, 1.
This is The Jungle, an up-close, unvarnished look inside leadership and business strategy. We wade into the real-world leader's face and explore what they do to create a path forward, because that's what business is. Wild, exciting.
It's the jungle.
And we're back in the jungle. Derek McIver, how are we doing today?
The jungle. Back in the jungle. I love it. Yeah. Doing good. How are you doing, Doug?
I'm doing great. We had a fantastic Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. You want to give a little bit of a shout out there, Derek?
Yeah. A lot of great mothers in my life, Doug. So one, my mom, Hillary McIver, she listens to this, probably our favorite listener. So shout out, Happy Mother's Day. And my wife, Stacy, who's an amazing mother. Couldn't do what I do without her because she's so supportive and does some amazing work herself. So 2 Happy Mother's Day there to the 2 moms that are directly in my life for sure. And then, I'll throw out my sister-in-laws and that whole group too.
So, and Stacy's out there making it happen as a teacher. And gosh knows all of us who are homeschooling right now are just like, we are not paying those teachers anywhere close to what they should be paid.
Oh, I got a funny story. Probably shouldn't say it, but I homeschooled for 4 hours this morning with my kids because my wife was teaching her class. And it took me, my son was crying for a half hour. I didn't know what he was crying about. I don't know if the question was too hard, reading was too hard. And turns out he plugged the toilet and he was sad. Couldn't figure it out. Lost.
There you go. It's all these great learnings that the pandemic has given us. That's right.
Impossible.
Well, shout out to my mom who's out there. She's actually working at Hurley Hospital, helping some folks through the mental health challenges that's going on with in hospitals. So shout out to her, and I'm sure she's probably our second listener that we have, the 2 listeners we have. And then shout out to my wife Kristen, who she just started as executive director of KC Ready Fours in Kalamazoo, and she actually started on the first week of the crisis, which was a great leadership story that she'll be able to tell one day. They've got a nice little campaign that they started in their organization on trying to give voice to early childhood ed. So shout out and a plug for them to support early childhood ed, support the teachers out there. So happy Mother's Day to everybody. Hope it was a good one. We had a great guest here this week, phenomenal guest, Kevin Lobo, who is the chairman and chief executive officer of Stryker, serves on a number of boards, including the Business Roundtable. Stryker, for everyone here in Southwest Michigan, knows them. They're a Fortune 250 company. Under his leadership, incredible growth of Stryker. So since 2012, he's grown the company from $8 billion to over $15 billion. Acquired, I think last I heard, 50 companies. A phenomenal leader, a great company that the world needs right now around healthcare and medical devices. So it was a phenomenal conversation. We're gonna do a little something different today, which is one takeaway, and then what can you as a leader do tomorrow to implement that takeaway. So what was yours, Derek, from that conversation?
Well, so good, great, tremendous guest. That was a great conversation. Takeaways, feedbacks. Some listeners have been emailing us. Keep the emails coming. We're trying to adjust to all your feedback as it comes in. So we're happy to take all the feedback, good and bad. If you want to yell at us. We'll listen and try to adjust. But it's good to see feedback coming. It means we're having some success, I think. So good. So the takeaways, I was surprised to hear him talk about the impact of technology. Everyone thinks, yeah, we've had technology, computers, all this stuff, and everybody's online and doing virtual stuff. And then he was amazed at how much more they could do. And, talking about just scratching the surface with technology, so much more you can do. You mentioned some products like Microsoft Teams, and there's other ones like Bluescape and some collaboration tools and Slack and these types of things. And then a lot of video streaming tools like Zoom that we're on right now. I mean, as a leader, you need to get on this stuff, I would say. Listening to him, it's going to change the way we do business. It's going to change the way people interact. It's here to stay. The surface, they've gone deep on all this stuff, and they're operating at a high level with some of it still. I think just experiment with it. All these companies got a bunch of free stuff, a bunch of free offers. go try it out, go give it a test run, see if it works for you, see if it drives collaboration, see how it works, because everything's not going to work for everybody. But now's the time to experiment with everything. And if it fails, everyone's going to understand right now because we're all learning and all this new technology. So that's my one suggestion, because technology, we thought it was going to have an impact, and it's really going to have an impact now. So that was my takeaway. And one thing you can do tomorrow is just start experimenting with all of it. Give it all a test run.
Well, it's a great opportunity to do that now, especially with all the free tools out there, and try something different, right? Try a different tool that you might not have normally use. That's great. So the takeaway that I had, I really liked this, was it was buried in there, but they over a period of time set up weekly and then bi-weekly customer calls where they would bring in a customer or a collection of customers. They would bring in salespeople, R&D folks, other people from the organization to sit in and listen and ask questions from their customer. I thought that was genius on so many fronts. Adam Grant's great research on pro-social impact, being connected to your customer increases your motivation, makes your work feel more meaningful. But it's way more than that, because during this crisis, things are changing so quickly. That's a great point to get feedback, to learn about how you need to innovate, how you need to better serve your customers during this time, because everybody's needs are changing. So I thought that was a really smart way, and that's something you could do tomorrow. The weekly call with your customers, bring a collection of folks from your organization, do that tomorrow, get some feedback from the market when you need it. So phenomenal conversation. We hope everybody enjoys this conversation with Kevin Lobo, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Stryker. The Jungle is produced by the Center for Principled Leadership and Business Strategy in Western Michigan University's Hayworth College of Business. Our center supports the leadership and business strategy major, conducts large-scale consulting projects, and trains professionals in acquiring and operating small businesses. To learn more, visit wmich.edu/leadership center. Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
I'm glad to be here.
So do you have a beverage here? Let's do a little cheers.
Cheers. I have a tea.
Tea. What kind of tea? What kind of tea are you drinking today?
Today I'm drinking Earl Grey.
Earl Grey. Okay. I got a nice. Are you a tea fan? I'm drinking some Darjeeling today, actually.
Yeah, Darjeeling's great. Yes, I lived in London for 2 years, so I usually like Assam is my favorite. But in the afternoon, I tend to migrate over to Earl Grey.
There you go. What do you got? What do you have today, Derek?
I actually have the tea you recommended to me. I can't pronounce it, Doug. It starts with the G. What's it called? The Gayo.
Goikuru, a good Japanese green tea.
Goikuru. There you go. Yeah. I have Goikuru. Yeah.
So Kevin, really appreciate you.
Doug's got me on tea. I was a huge coffee drinker. He got me off.
That's right. So Kevin, we really appreciate you taking time to join us today. Can you tell us a little bit about where you're at right now?
I'm sitting in my home office in North New Jersey.
Okay. It looks like you have some nice weather out there today.
Yep, beautiful sunny day.
Excellent. Looks like we have a little bit of internet issues. Which is just the modern times that we live in, which is all good. So, Kevin, crazy time we're living through these days. Do you have any new habits, new routines that you're trying out during this wonderful pandemic?
Yeah, well, the first one is eating very healthy. So now that I'm under the supervision of my wife, I could tell you that my eating habits have improved immensely. Not being on the road, not traveling, and just grazing on snack foods, and my eating habits I feel healthier than I have in a long time, and having regular fitness is great. Luckily I have a gym in my basement. So I'm doing, I would say, more frequent, regular exercise, fitness. And I think with my team, I'm doing a lot more regular and frequent communications. So short in duration, but very, very frequent, just to stay in touch. And I feel like I'm very connected with my team, maybe even more so than I was before, when you're kind of running around, traveling, and you're busy. And so this has forced more frequent and short communications and connections with my team. So all three of those, honestly, are very, very positive things. It is difficult when you don't get to see people, and that dynamic is harder, but technology has been surprisingly productive, more than I could have ever imagined.
That's phenomenal. So can you walk us into, you're running an amazing company. a Fortune 500 company. You're the CEO of that company. Can you just share with us a little bit of a behind the scenes of like, what has the last, 6-8 weeks been like for you going through this crisis?
Yeah, it's been very strange. It's not normal for us to be stuck at home. My job, I'm normally on the road about 400 hours in the air of travel. That's kind of what I average. And so to be home every day is very, very foreign. It's strange. We have a very high touch culture at Stryker where we like to be with everybody. I was very lucky that the timing of the coronavirus was after all of my sales meetings. So that's an annual ritual at Stryker where you get out and you see all the sales forces and the people who are in the operating room every day supporting the doctors and the nurses. And so I was able to do all of those sales meetings, almost all. I wasn't able to get to China, and obviously the coronavirus hit there much earlier than other parts of the globe. But I was able to get to virtually all of the other ones, including even Japan. And so that gives me tremendous energy coming into the year. So we had a good sort of normal setup to the year. And then, of course, this has been just strange to work in this new way in this new world. For my leadership team, it's not as difficult. We were already virtual. So obviously I have a place in Kalamazoo, but I also have my main house in New Jersey. My CFO is in the Bay Area. My head of HR is in Kalamazoo. We have my lawyers in Boston. So we have a very virtual group already. And I think that made it a little bit easier a transition for Stryker than it has for some of my other CEOs I've spoken to who are used to going into the office and having all of their direct reports in offices right beside them in the same building. We were never operating in that manner. So I think that made it a little bit easier for us. But the harder part is, not being able to go to people's locations to do business reviews. Just this morning, we did our Q1 town hall meeting, and Yin was with me, but we had 5 people in a small little building with a video camera and no audience. Usually there's a live audience that asks me questions and we roam around. So we're adapting, and I would say it's been a little bit strange, but it's been surprisingly productive. We've been able to do things more or less, even in engagement with physicians. We're doing it all virtually. I think if this had happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago, it would have been very, very difficult, exponentially more difficult. But the advent of this kind of technology like we're using today has made it much, much better.
So let's follow on there, because the Stryker culture is famous where we are in the Kalamazoo area. That you guys are known for your culture, one of the best places to work. All of our students aspire to work there. Can you tell, has it been challenging to maintain that culture? Has it been a benefit for you to have that culture through this pandemic, or maybe some other companies wouldn't get that benefit? And some of the things you're doing daily to make sure that culture stays intact.
Yeah, so we talk about that a lot, actually. My leadership team, which Yin is our head of comms, who's also sitting in, she's a member of that leadership team. We talk about it a lot, that we have this high-touch, relationship-based, very engaging culture. And we're trying very hard. I haven't really thought about, do we have an advantage versus others because of it? I think we always have an advantage. When you have a good culture, it's good in good times, and it's probably better in bad times to have that strong culture. What we've done to try to help maintain it is, I would say, a lot, very, very frequent communication, much more so than in a normal environment. Meaning, I'm doing weekly videos from my home, from my iPhone, that we're blasting out to all employees. The team members are doing the same. The leadership team members are doing all these communications with their leadership team using Zoom and Microsoft Teams. We're having all kinds of venues where people can share best practices, talk about their experiences with customers. We've done every 2 weeks a leaders call with about, let's say, roughly 200 leaders of our company from around the world. And on those calls, initially it was weekly in the month of April, and now we've shifted to every 2 weeks. But we actually invite customers to come and talk about what's going on in their world. And we have different leaders explain, like in New York, the head of trauma in New York talked about how he's leading his team who are walking into these hospitals where coronavirus is rampant, and how they're helping their customers deal with trauma cases with patients that need treatment. So we have a lot of people on the front lines. And in these sessions, we're also talking about innovations we've come up with, like the emergency relief bed you may have heard about that we developed in Kalamazoo. by the medical division, an amazing new innovation that was from concept to launch was less than 2 weeks. And something we didn't even have in our portfolio, but is in response to the pandemic, to get a low-cost portable bed out to places that are needing to set up these facilities for patients who have coronavirus. So it's created spurned innovation. We've even had different ways of engaging with surgeons that was always used to be face-to-face, but we're now doing it through videos, and that's going very, very well. So those are some of the things that we're doing that are different and that actually are reinforcing our culture. It's never quite the same as being in person, but certainly I'm very lucky that my leadership team, we didn't have any new members this year. So the newest member was our general counsel was sort of last year. So having a stable leadership team has really helped. I think if I had a number of people who had just joined, that probably would have made this trickier. So I think we were fortunate in that respect. But yes, we're leaning on the culture as heavily as possible with videos and stories and use of technology. If anything, I want someone to complain to me, which has never happened in my career, that I'm complaining about them communicating to them too much. Please stop.
There you go.
It hasn't happened yet. So we're erring on the side of extra frequent and communicating like crazy. And I think that's helping us to preserve our culture.
So the relief beds, the emergency beds that you guys came to market with so rapidly, I think is a great story of innovation and a great point to share with our listeners around how were you guys successful in bringing something like that to market, especially in a large, complex organization that you have there at Stryker. What's the takeaway and the lesson that you want to share on how to bring those innovations to market?
Well, the first is our structure. So even though we're a large company, we did about 15 billion in revenue last year. We have about 40,000 employees. We are very decentralized. So the real center of gravity of our company is the individual business units, the divisions. We call them divisions of our company. Medical is a division of our company that's headquartered in Kalamazoo, and they have their own R&D, their own marketing, their own sales, and they're intensely customer focused. And so that's where innovation happens. It doesn't happen, in some central office. And they recognized this need very quickly. Their engineers sat down and said, could we do something? What could we do? And they came up with this concept, which didn't even exist in our portfolio, of a bed that you would kind of like an IKEA bed that you could assemble, that could be shipped in a very narrow box. And they had to go procure the steel. I mean, miles and miles and miles of steel to tubing to be able to build the bed. And so getting the supplies and making it simple, because our beds are very complex. They have all kinds of connectivity. This has none of that connectivity, none of the sophistication for pressure ulcers. This is just a very basic bed. But they also decided that it had to be able to tilt upwards because, as you know, one of the conditions of coronavirus is respiratory issues. So being able to lift the patient and so that they could breathe more easily. So they had the basic minimum requirements and nothing else. No bells, no whistles, just how can we get something fast? And the team came up with this all on their own and called the FDA, and the FDA granted emergency use authorization, which was incredible. And so we got very, very quick approval for this. And what we're seeing is the demand for this bed is actually very significant outside the United States. In Latin America, in Europe, we're starting to also build a bed in Europe. I think this will become a permanent product in our portfolio. And even after the pandemic goes away, the beauty of this bed is it gets assembled on site. And it's in such a small package that they can actually stack these in stockpiles for whenever the next issue pops up. So it's been very, very popular, very well received by our customers, and much less expensive than a typical bed, and we can make them very, very quickly. And so in many locations, we had workers that were idled because their factory, we have a lot of elective surgery that's not happening, as you know. So their products were not in demand. And those employees, like in Mahwah, New Jersey, were rediverted to actually build these beds and the components and put them in the boxes. So it's a great success story, but it's all about having decentralized decision-making and business units that are close to their customers. And we give them a lot of freedom.
The speed element of that story is really amazing too, because it's not only are you decentralized, it sounds like they're also empowered, but the rapidness that you guys brought that to market is amazing. And
it is, and I think it's inspired us because a lot of times, our cycles, they're pretty fast, but not, that's blinding speed. We've never really been known for blinding speed, and part of that is because of the regulatory approval process. You know that you have to go through the testing, and the advantage of the pandemic, if you will, on this innovation side, is that you have regulatory bodies that are just very open to have things approved on an emergency basis, and then, as the product performs, if you need to make alterations later, you can do that later. And so that's been a huge help as well. But it has inspired our teams to think, and my question to them is, well, if you can be this fast now, why not be this fast later? So, I have said that to a few people.
So as we go through this, a lot of people are talking about a new normal. You've mentioned that, some surgeries are being canceled, which is hurting some of the business units probably. What do you see, staying as part of the new normal? A lot of virtual meetings with some of these doctors you're talking about, and what do you see as maybe reverting back? And how critical is it for you guys to stay on this innovation speed right now, or products to a new healthcare market that we're in right now?
Yeah, so that's a lot of questions in there. So let me start with what I don't think will change is that our salespeople and service people are going to be needed by the hospitals. And those that are sort of being sidelined for a while because elective surgeries, hips and knee surgeries, spine surgeries, endoscopy surgery, those have been obviously stopped. They're going to restart. And when they're restarted, our people are going to be needed to help. And so that won't change. But there's many things that will change. So the first thing is, I think we're going to use technology. We've made a huge advance in technology. As a company, we are not going to travel anywhere near as much as we used to. There's a lot of excess travel we used to do that we now realize we don't need to actually physically get on planes and travel, and we can get the work done through the use of technology. Even with our customers, having virtual exchanges with our customers, I think that'll become part of our arsenal going forward. I believe that flex time is going to become much more valuable. It was already happening at our company. One of the reasons people love to work for Stryker is we are pretty open-minded about people living in different places, having virtual teams, being able to have flex hours. But what I think we've learned is we were just scratching the surface, that giving people flexibility to work certain times at home, and you can be very productive. And I think even for a company, we thought we were a little bit ahead of the curve. We realized we're just scratching the surface, and that's going to continue. I think the offices of the future are going to be very different. So for example, I don't even know that I need a full-time office. Why do I have an office in Kalamazoo? I have an office in New Jersey. I don't even think I need an office. When I'm traveling, I'll just use a guest office. I'm just giving you an example to say, I think that the notion is, right, the workspace is that, why do we have a fixed-based office with all people's files? And you don't need any of that stuff. You can keep that stuff in your home, and most things are electronic anyways. And when we visit whatever location, just use have some shared open facilities that people can use. And so I think we're going to rethink our footprint for office, not for manufacturing, but for office-based work. It's going to be very different than it was before. And I think we're going to be more flexible, more malleable. And I think it's going to give people more freedom. I think what people are realizing is, this rigid idea, everybody shows up to work at X time and everybody leaves at X time. And I think that's outdated. Not to say that we were following that, but I think this giving people more flexibility it's been out of necessity now, because people have their kids at home and they're caring for an elderly parent. And so we've had to be flexible. And what we realized is we can be very productive while being flexible. And I think that'll become permanent. And if employers don't embrace that, they're going to lose out. So to me, it's something we're going to double down on when things come back to whatever that new normal is.
Do you see lasting changes to the healthcare space and med tech from this? Or is
well, yeah, you did mention, sorry, in the last question, subpart 3, you mentioned something about innovation. Innovation has always been the lifeblood of our company. We launch a steady stream of new products every year. We also do a lot of acquisitions, which I call external innovation. That's not going to stop. And I think the use of digital will be even more important going forward. For us, most of our products are in the acute care. They're acute care interventions. We're not really in disease management. But if you think about diabetes, if you think about our hospital customers, they're doing much more, I'll say teleconsultations, teleconsults, and telerehab. So after surgery, even though we're not in the rehab business ourselves, our customers are going to do a lot more rehab at home, where the person after their hip or knee replacement would prefer to go home than going to a rehab center. And on their TV, they'll be able to see exercises they can do at home. I think the reimbursement opened up for teleconsults, and that's never going to go back. I think we've made 10 years of progress in the last 3 months in terms of the adoption of telehealth. Now, for Stryker, it's a little less important, but there's other med tech companies that I speak to that are in disease management, like cancer and diabetes, and that all of that data management and management of the full patient is going to be really important. We do have some software that we use. We call it Recovery Coach, that helps the patient afterwards on their recovery. And I think that adoption will increase exponentially going forward.
Let's talk maybe a little bit more about leadership. What have you found your role to be in terms of caring and supporting your senior team and your organization? What are the lessons you'd want to share out to other leaders about how you support an organization through a crisis like this?
Yeah, I think that the first lesson is you have to be calm. The leaders have to be very calm. When you have a storm brewing, everyone looks to you for calm, deliberate, positive. This sort of, what are we going to do? When are we going to do it? And just so that calmness, I think, and positive outlook is always important. I've always been a very positive person, but it's easy to be positive when you're winning. And when you watch your sales start to drop, you have to maintain that calmness. I think that's the first step. Second is engage everybody and listen a lot to the stresses that they're experiencing. We set up a coronavirus action team, and that was hugely important to make sure we started introducing policies to restrict travel. We had a customer event with surgeons going to do training that we decided to cancel, and customers were upset at us. And I decided to engage directly with those customers to tell them why, for their own safety, and the safety of our employees, this was not a good idea. And the two that were upset, funnily enough, one of them, 2 days later, their hospital wouldn't let them travel. And so they wouldn't have gone themselves. And then the other one said, you were right to make the decision. They admitted that maybe 3 weeks later. But so you have to be firm in whatever the decisions you make. You have to be firm. You have to stand behind them, and then you have to support your team. So it's even if the customer is giving you backlash, then as a CEO, I'm willing to talk to that customer directly myself and provide the air cover to say, look, this is a corporate decision that I've made. It's not. Do not take it out on your local salesperson or your local general manager, because this is why I'm doing it, and this is why I believe it's the right decision. So being firm and resolute on your decision making. We had to make some tough decisions to preserve cash and for financial reasons that people weren't used to before. And so there's a shared sacrifice involved, and as a leader, you have to be part of that shared sacrifice. In the case of leadership salary reductions and things that we've done. And so I think as long as you're empathetic, you have to show your human side, which I've done, and sharing what you're going through, it helps with people so that they don't feel nervous raising issues. And so we've always had a culture that's very approachable, where people aren't afraid. And I think if you have that degree of accessibility of your leadership team, then bad news travels fast. People surface the conflicts that they're trying to deal with, and you can get through it. And it was 24/7 coronavirus for literally a month. And the things you have to think about, things you never imagined before, like, can people go to work? If they go to work, do they have to wear a mask? How far can they sit apart? Should you close the cafeteria? What about daycare? People that have people at home, can they stay home? I mean, every day there were dozens of decisions we were making in the first sort of 2-3 weeks. And it all sounds simple, but it's not. What about the manufacturing people that still have to go to work? Are they the have-nots and everyone else is staying at home? Don't forget those people. So getting protective equipment to our salespeople or our warehouse people who are still working was a huge challenge. So I could go on and on, but just to suffice to say, You just have to, you have to have the right form in the vehicle. And this creation of our action team, which was led by our chief operating officer, Tim Scannell, was huge, right? He and our head of operations, Viju, sort of co-chaired this, and they were making decisions like this very, very quickly, pushing out policies, pushing out guidelines. And even as we return to work, we may not be as liberal as some of the local governors and communities are. We might choose to be more restrictive because we want to protect our employees. We were very clear. We had 3 priorities, which I set from basically the first week. And I've repeated them over and over and over again. First is to protect our employees and the safety of our employees. The second, serve our customers. Third, display strong financial discipline. And every time we launch a new financial policy about stopping capital expenditures, delaying a project, because we have to be very thoughtful about certain innovations. We're continuing full speed. Some other capital projects, sorry, right? We have this big IT project. We're going to delay that. And we're going to resume that in 6 months or when things get better, because if you can't have people traveling to do an implementation, you can only do so much virtually. So some things you have to decide what's turned off, what's turned on, and be very transparent with the employees about what's going on. And that's what we've tried to do. And I think it's gone very well thus far. And the engagement, and we just did this town hall this morning, our Q1 town hall, and we had 30 minutes of Q&A in a 1-hour call. And we didn't even get through all the questions. So, employees are dying to be heard. Especially if they're working from home. And we had a lady in Ireland working from home, and she's alone. She's living. She's not married. She doesn't have kids, and so that it's a different challenge that she's facing. I'm not saying it's easier or harder, but it's a very different challenge than someone who's home with their kids who should be at school. So everyone's going through their own challenge, and it's all difficult, but it's different.
Yeah.
And being able to voice all that's really important.
Derek, do you want to do one more question before we wrap up here?
No, go rapid fire. I think.
Well, I got another. I got another
Okay.
one then, because
take one.
I'm really interested on this. So, one of our previous guests, Kevin Carmody at McKinsey, talked about some of the senior leadership teams that he is seeing are not moving fast enough with the speed of decision making. And you got incomplete information. You got to make these decisions really quick, and it sounds like the volume there is very high, because people sometimes want to freeze. What is the lesson you'd share to how people can move through that decision making at a high velocity in a way that's productive?
Well, I think the key is you got to get your input very quickly, and you have to have a decision making body or vehicle. So for us in coronavirus, we had this coronavirus action team, which had cross-functional representation and authority to make decisions. And that's what they did. And they were meeting, I think, daily for the first 3 weeks, every day. What's this new decision? Should this policy, and they were pushing out policies on a daily basis. So I think you need, if you don't have that war room, if you will, with people who are empowered to make those decisions, then you'll be slow. And so that was a critical step that we took, and empowered them to go ahead and make decisions and push the communications out. But you don't want to rush either. So there's times when you have to be thoughtful about, what as it related to our employees, right? We did not move to furlough, and some companies moved very fast and furloughed their employees right away. And we said, we don't want to do that yet. Let's see how this plays out, because that's a decision. It's hard to unring the bell once you furlough the employee, and they have to go in unemployment lines. And you saw what those unemployment lines were like. So we did not want to do any furloughing. We decided we're going to hold for the whole month of April. Hopefully by then, all the websites will be up and running, and if our people do need to be furloughed, we're going to delay that decision until May. And that was an intentional decision. We take the financial pain, but we wanted to sort of protect our employees physically for their safety, and also financially, at least for that initial period of time. And we knew we had the wherewithal to be able to do that. So that was a pause. We knew we'd revisit that decision. And then when we revisited that decision, we did decide, once we saw that it was going to be much slower to come back, that it wasn't going to be a V-shaped recovery, then we decided that people that were already idled, being paid full salary, we decided to move them some of those people into an unpaid status. But by then, the worst of the lineups and the website failures and the worst of that was over. And so they're now starting to face that in the month of May, but we were able to get through that storm. So, I think in our case, I believe we acted very, very swiftly on the things that really mattered. in
Yeah.
terms of the safety of our employees, the protective equipment, and no travel, all of those physical distancing. We basically forced people to work from home. And we said, unless you have a reason to go in the office, you have to work from home. Tell us what the reason is. And so that take-up rate was very, very high. And we were a little bit militant about it, but we just felt like we had to do it for safety reasons, especially because we had locations in the Bay Area or in North Jersey, right near New York, that were in real hot zones. And so we decided to do that. And I think those were the right decisions. So I feel very good about that. And I don't think the things that we delayed on were very intentional, and they were decisions we wanted to delay on because, rushing isn't also a good idea.
Yeah, those are great lessons. So, mindful of time here, let's wrap up here. We got some rapid fire questions that we'd love to ask that we're asking all the guests, and one word answer types, and we're ready to go. Ready? Favorite leader?
Yeah, ready.
Okay, favorite leader.
Oh, favorite leader, Jeff Bezos.
Courage or compassion?
Compassion.
Speed or accuracy?
Speed.
Great ideas or great execution?
That's tough to choose between. I'll say great execution, but they're both important.
These are all tough, and everybody wants to say but yeah, they're all good here. So, a word to describe your leadership style?
I would say engaging.
Are you an early bird or a night owl?
I was an early bird until I moved to France for 2 years, and then I became a night owl.
Very nice.
They beat it into me.
Okay. And then if you had an animal that really captured your spirit, embodied your leadership, what would be the animal that you would pick?
Interestingly, I traveled to Spain with my young niece who's 10 years old, and she picked an animal for every person. There was 18 of us. My wife's father turned 80. 18 of us on this trip through Spain, and she named me a dolphin. And that's the name she gave to me, I think because, I don't know, she said friendly and inquisitive and engaging. So that's kind of the words. She used the 8-year-old version of those words, but so she called me a dolphin. So it seemed appropriate. I'd never honestly ever thought about it before.
There you go.
She named me that. So
perfect.
I'll stick with dolphin.
Dolphin, excellent. Well, Kevin leads a great company here at Stryker in Kalamazoo. Really appreciate your time joining the podcast.
Great. Thank you. I enjoyed it.